the shortcuts we take on our way to get it right. Two distinct mental processes toward, toward us when we aim to get it right in spontaneous speaking. To understand the first of to understand the first of these, let's return to the shout the wrong name game. I invite you to take another stab at it. Again, 15 or 20 seconds of pointing two objects and shouting out whatever word jumps to mind. Are you finished? Good. This time, think about the words you shouted. Although the assignment was to shout out words at random, did you notice your brain consciously or unconsciously deploying a strategy to perform this task? Did the words you did the words you choose to follow a pattern? When my students play this game, they often report calling out words that belong to a common category. In quick succession, they'll point to objects and shout the names of fruits, animals, colors, and so on. Other students share that they borrow words used by others in the room or they use the real name of previous object that they look at. Some quickly think of several words with the idea that they'll use those for the next several objects to which they point. As Adam Tobin highlights during his debriefs of this game, such strategies are perfectly normal, part of how our brains respond when we try to master challenging situations. Psychologists explain this via cognitive load theory, which holds that we often only have a finite amount of working memory to devote to the task before us. When too much information barrages our brain all at once, as often occurs in our modern tech-centered world, our working memory becomes overtaxed and we struggle to learn. To avoid this outcome, our brains try to help us out. They quickly and effortlessly call up mental shortcuts, or heuristics. They allow us to solve problems and perform the tasks that confront us. Heuristics are a primary tool to deploy in our efforts to get it right and achieve perfection. We commonly rely on heuristics during spontaneous speaking. When an irate customer confronts us with a problem, our brains click in and we give a standard sort of reply, perhaps something like, I'm sorry to hear that is not working out for you. Did you set the product up properly? When we learn of when we learn of our friends lost, we say, my thoughts are with you. When our relatives share some bad news, we give standard reply like, I'm I'm sure it will be okay. When a friend asks what we think of a difficult interaction they have with a coworker, we unthinkingly reply, it is what it is. Heuristics are essential in that they help us respond decisively and efficiently in complex situations, lightening the cognitive load we bear. Confronted with a task, we don't have to think about it, we just do it. If we lack heuristics, we'd be stimped at every turn. Imagine how wondrous Imagine how wondrous we'd find it at the grocery store. We'd, ha- we'd have to think through the pros and cons of every brand and variety of spaghetti sauce before choosing one to buy. Instead, we apply a simple rule, something like I want a sauce that's organic and doesn't cost too much money. The surprising power of because. This efficiency, however, comes at a cost in two key respects. First, heuristics limits our spontaneity, which interferes with our ability to be present. In a famous experiment, psychologist Ellen Langer had participants approach people waiting in line to use a photocopier and asked if they could cut in. The would-be line cutter praised the request in different ways in cases using the word because and offering a rational. As she found as she found, people waiting in line were far more likely to agree to let someone cut it. They used the word because and offered a rational. This held true regardless of whether the rationale was relatively strong. I'm in a rush or weak. Excuse me, I have some copies to make. May I use the Xerox machine because I need to make copies? The word because apparently prompted people to go on autopilot, triggering a heuristic in their minds. Perhaps something like, I let someone cut in front of me if they have a reason. Rather than being present in the moment and listening carefully, one simple word justifying a small request triggers a tendency to behave mindlessly and distractedly. As a result, we don't take the time to slow down and observe nuances of our environment, and we miss subtle, perhaps not so subtle elements of it. If you're in the grocery, if you're in a grocery store vetting spaghetti sauces on the basis of their price and whether they're organic, you might not notice whether some of them are slightly different variety, say chunkier vodka infused, or if they have ingredients you don't want, such as added sugar. As a result, you have you might wind up making a decision you later find subpar. When we deploy heuristics in interpersonal situations, we miss the nuances, including cues related to our audience's members' needs. Let's say your colleague pops into your office and asks you unexpectedly for feedback on a meeting you were both just in. Your give feedback on meeting heuristic kicks in and you immediately begin responding with an answer that next steps following the meeting, adjustments to plans, and other action items that were discussed. But your colleague may want something else, validation of their leadership ability, say, or maybe even just an expression of warmth or friendship on your part. You're so locked into the notion of I must now say what I thought of that meeting that you miss an opportunity to connect in a more meaningful way. Effective, spontaneous communication requires us to break out of our existing behavior patterns and ruts. Rather than hurry to respond to a situation, we must put a hold on heuristics, taking a moment to really assess the situation we're in and perhaps ask clarifying questions. In the above example, a non-heuristic induced response might lead us to ask something like, are you looking for feedback on the specifics of the meeting, or do you want me to tell you my general impressions? Alternatively, we might ask our colleague what they thought about the meeting before sharing our opinion. Such questions might well yield information we can use to react more effectively. Now, that's the right way to eat spaghetti. Our use of heuristics poses a second problem. It limits our creativity. Because our brains are operating in rule bound ways, we tend to arrive to answers and are expected, familiar, or logical. We are less likely to spontaneously generate reactions that are more creative, novel, or out there. One of my favorite examples in this regard comes from a class my colleague Tina Seelig taught years ago to design students at Stanford. Dividing her students into teams, she had them compete to arrive at the best, most innovative business idea. Each group had 2 hours and $5 at their disposal. Using these resources, they had to earn as much money as possible, without breaking the law, of course. Afterward, Each team would spend 3 minutes presenting their business idea in front of the class. The team that earned the most money would win the competition. Most groups generate business ideas that were intriguing but not especially mind blowing. One group made a quiet bit of money by making reservations in advance at popular restaurants and selling them to hungry diners. This is before the advent of online reservation services. Another group of cop Another group made a couple of $100 by setting up a stand on the Stanford campus and offering to measure students' tire pressure and fill up their tires. At first, they charged for filling the tires, but I soon found that they earned more when they simply asked grateful students for a donation. Another team took a whole different approach. These students reasoned that the most valuable resource they could sell wasn't their ability to perform a service for customers, but rather to deliver a captive audience for companies wishing to recruit students for employment. To, gen- to generate review revenue, to generate revenue, they sold their 3 minutes of presentation time to a design firm. They would they would they wound up earning $650, more money than any other team. The other team, the other team, the, oth- the other teams had followed a heuristic. To make money, to make money, I've got to dream of some service customers would find attractive. But that heuristic locked them in, limiting the kinds of ideas they could generate. The winning team didn't follow the heuristic. As a result, they opened themselves up to ask different set of questions. What resource that I possess has the most value and how can I best market that? Relying on heuristics might enable us to respond quickly when put on the spot, but we usually aren't opening ourselves to many other possible paths that might surprise or deeply engage our audiences. It is only when we manage to suspend it is only when we manage to suspend it is only when we manage to suspend and venture beyond our normal mental rules that magic can happen. Some time ago, some time ago, I had a privilege of teaching high school English for 2 years. If you want a setting where an ability to speak on fly helps, this is it. Every day brought some new, unexpected communication challenge. I really had to stay on my toes. In one of my classes, I had a super smart kid who, for some reason, delighted in being disrupted in class. His tactic, he spontaneously and unpredictably blurt out random words and phrases during class discussion. I might be lecturing about the Great Gatsby when I'd hear a voice in the back of the room shouting something like, "My t shirt is dirty," or "The pigeons scare me." The other kids found these bizarre interjections amusing. Me, not much. I knew this boy was trying to get attention, so I usually didn't respond to his outbursts. One day, I couldn't help myself. I had been eating lunch before class, and I happened to have a small packet of Parmesan cheese on my desk. Halfway through the class, the boy blurted out, "I love spaghetti." Everyone laughed. I desperately, I desperately wanted this kid to keep quiet and behave. Spotting the cheese packet, Spotting the cheese packet, I said, "Hey, catch," and tossed it to him. Now, that's the right way to eat spaghetti. It was a spontaneous act of communication on my part, and it did the trick. Everyone laughed. Everyone laughed. They thought it was hilarious. We moved on with the lesson, and the boy kept quiet. Up until that point, I have been following my standard teaching heuristic, such as ignore and move on.